Rumble is a pretty interesting legend in the fact that we get Anthem effect in Rift Banners. We haven't really seen our legend before, but it's completely attached to mechs, and currently in the game, all of the mechs currently suck and have no synergy between each other. So we're just gonna have to wait and see if they print any new or any good mechs for this deck. One positive about this card though is that being in red-blue, we have access to some pretty solid interaction pieces for helping us hold battlefields. Given by the fact that we want to hold a battlefield as much as possible to get the most out of Rumble's shield effect. Cards like Smokescreen, Stupefy, Voidseeker, and Falling Star are all going to be great type of cards in this deck, as it gives us the ability to control a battlefield early and then use cheap spells to interact later on in the game. Overall, I think Rumble's a completely fine legend to play around. The effect is pretty solid, the strategy has a simple game plan to it, but again, we just have to wait to see if any of the mechs are pretty good, as that's all we have to rely on for the strategy. As for new cards to get, just literally buy every single mech. And for our selected champion, I would recommend, honestly, the blue one. It's pretty close between the two, but I think the blue one, it gives a bigger stat effect, as well as creating a token every turn, which makes our board even stronger. I'm going to give Rumble a B.
Just a second! I'm in the middle of it!
So Lucian's one of our first legends that is built around the new equipment mechanic, so let's just go over that real quick. Equipments are gears that when they are in play, they can be equipped to other units. The equip cost is usually just 1 power, but we have seen alternate costs. Equipment will give bonuses to the unit that it's attached to. For example, Trinity Force will give +2 might to a unit, and when I hold, score 1 point. Note again that they do not give any benefits or effects when they are not equipped to a unit. So with Lucian, he seems like a really solid aggro card. As to make the most out of his ability, we want to play cheap, efficient units and then equip them with even cheaper equipment. Equipment like Warmog's Armor and Duran's Blade, again, are really cheap to cast and are really efficient to equip as well, while giving a substantial buff like +1 and +2. And then on top of Lucian's +1 as well with Assault, you can get some pretty big minions of some Accelerate units. However, one thing that would be interesting for this aggro deck is that we are going to be able to break through the damage removal that we don't like to see in aggro matchups, as equipment will allow us to break through those damage barriers that those spells give out, so it might be good against Annie and Kai'Sa in the future. However, the only real downside with Lucian is that we're going to see a bit more better interaction with weapons from other legends that we'll see in a moment. So overall, I think Lucian is just a solid card. I think we haven't seen an orange-red deck in the meta at all. So it'll be a nice change of pace, and it'll be a good take on the aggro style of gameplay. As for new cards to look out for, we typically want to look for cards that are able to equip weapons really easy, like Sentinel Adept and Rel with the ability to have Weapon Master or attach for free. We typically do want to see the cheaper side of equipment, so we want to run the cheapest ones as possible, for example Hex Drinker. And as for our champion unit, I recommend the Red Lucian, as even though we're playing an aggro deck, this card just seems like a really nice way to remove or clear the board. Lucian is gonna get a B.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Draven looks, I don't know how to put this besides absolutely bloody busted. One thing to remind everyone is that card draw in Riftbound is very limited, and we haven't seen too much of it. So the fact that our legend gives free card draw for just winning combat is absolutely insane. But the reason why this could potentially be super busted is the style of deck it can play. This deck could play very similarly to Annie. Let's create a scenario. Let's say your opponent is trying to conquer a battlefield that you are currently holding. And let's say you just play Fight or Flight. Now you win the combat, so now you just draw a card with Draven's ability. So effectively, it turns nearly every single interaction that makes you win a combat a free card with Draven, which is nuts. This lets us keep the pressure up very consistently and very easily as we just keep drawing more and more cards and outvalue our opponent in pure attrition. And we're in red-purple, so we have some of the best interaction in the game and the best ways to conquer. We have Gus, Fight or Flight, Voidseeker, Rebuke, Ride the Wind, already some of the best interaction we've seen in Riftbound. And we have access to some of the best units that can attack early, like Darius and Vayne, that can conquer very effectively and very efficiently. Throw in some staples like Stack the Deck, and you honestly have one of the stronger, in my opinion, one of the strongest red-purple decks. So we have a legend with a really strong ability in a really strong color combination. Yeah, Draven's just going to be one of those one of the most powerful legends in the Spirit Forge set, and it's 100% going to be in the meta and 100% going to be playable. As for new cards to look out for, we want to find things that either win us combat or can protect us in combat. Rengar and Blood Rush are really cool, interesting options that are really great when we're attacking, alongside Vex, who's going to make our spells that we most likely are going to be playing a lot cheaper when we're in combat. As for our selected champion, the red one is just way better. Gets a punt where we need to attack, defends ourselves really well, and gives us a gold as a reward for playing our deck. Draven definitely gets an S.
Well, him. Bro, I knew I liked you, dude. Come here, bring it in. Bring it in, brother.
Mr. Boss, that's nice.
Now, this might just be talking from personal bias, but I think Reksai is pretty solid. Reksai's selected card draw of When We Conquer is pretty nice, especially in the color combination, as it lets us to dig through our deck a little bit more effectively. What I'm really excited about for Reksai, though, is if we try her in a baited hook deck. And here's my logic behind this. Right now, one of the strongest baited hook variants is the Darius version, and I think Reksai is a cool alternative to the deck for a couple of reasons. For one, we're still in Darius's colors, so we still have access to some of the best cards for baited hook. Cards like Vanguard Captain and Faithful Manufacturer that can spread the board out really quickly to help us with baited hook and give us more sack outlets. Spectral Matron will give us a chance to resurrect the units that we use with baited hook. And champions like Draven, who are really easy to see through baited hook, but once in play get really big. Second of all, when we don't see baited hook, Reksai can potentially act as a weaker version of the effect. We don't cheat the card's cost like baited hook does, but just being able to see the cards in general and just being able to play them off Reksai is just an overall very solid ability. Overall, Reksai has no real glaring weaknesses. There's nothing that out of this deck that's particularly bad. It's just more an overall solid deck. I think other decks might out-tweak it a little bit just based on their rate and effects, but overall just a very solid deck. For cards to look out for in the new set, I recommend looking out for Void Drones and Void Hatchlings, both really efficient minions that we can see early with very efficient stat lines. And even though we've seen both Reksai champions, I'm probably going to recommend the red one, as the red one gives us a late game push effect with the ability to accelerate our entire board. This might be a personal bias, but I think Reksai gets an A. Ornn is a pretty weird champion. Ornn is most reliable to Kai'Sa, which is currently one of the strongest decks in the format. But what Kai'Sa does for spells, Ornn does for equipment, saving you a power cost. Which is actually pretty crucial, as all equipment have an equip cost of 1 power of a specific rune type. This allows Ornn to be able to develop our board more efficiently, as we can net basically 1 rune every single time we try to equip to a unit, allowing us to more consistently reach the late game. Which kind of leads into the whole idea of equipment, as equipments are quite slow in nature, as we have to play a unit, the equipment, and then attach the equipment to the unit. Most likely the best way to play Ornn is a more mid-range to late game control deck, while we try to play efficient units and try to hold battlefields as much as possible while using equipments to make those units even stronger. And thankfully our cards are really good at being in defensive play, like a Stalwart Paro and Wheel of Water, which both gain a nice stat increase, and cards like Ori, which lets us benefit off the fact that we're going to be holding a lot with our units. And most likely you want to couple it with key interaction spells to protect our board as much as possible, like Defy, Discipline, Stupefy, and Smokescreen. All great spells that both interact or protect our boards in the best way possible. Overall, Ornn is a pretty weird deck, as if equipments aren't good, then Ornn isn't good, as equipment might be pretty slow, but if equipments are good, then Ornn is probably one of the better choices to pick, as we just save so much resources with Ornn's ability. With costs to get in the new set, it's pretty obvious. We're going to just try to get every single weapon we can. Sterak's Gage and Guardian Angel are both a really solid equipment as they protect our units from interaction, with Guardian Angel stopping our units from dying and Sterak's Gage giving a quick boost effect really quickly. Units like Aphelios and Jax are both really solid units that interact with weapons really nicely. And as for our selected champion unit, I believe that the Green Ore is going to have a slight edge, as we, instead of having a big late game win more type of card with the blue one, the Green Ore is going to give us a really nice card draw effect in the champion zone. Ornn gets a A. Now, Jax and Ornn are pretty much the exact same legend, except for one key difference. Jax does not interact at all with the costing of the equipment, and instead only interacts with the equipment cost of the equipment. This makes Jax a pretty interesting legend, as it's technically on paper a worse version of Ornn. However, in my opinion, Jax could potentially be as strong, if not better, purely because of its color combination. Orange and green is really well known for its strong interaction, with cards like On Guard, Sabotage, Primal Strength, Challenge, as well as having really strong units like First Mate, Kiana, Set, Deathloom Predator, and finally having strong ramp pieces like Find Your Center, Tasty Feyfolk, Mobilize, and Catalyst of Eons. This gives Jax the ability to be a really flexible deck, as you get to pick and choose what type of deck you want it to be. You can make it aggro, mid-range, or late game, as we currently have and will have a sufficient number of cards that can support all of these strategies. But no matter what type of strategy you decide to play with Jax, you can always just support it with the equipment, as the equipments are just bonuses on top of your units, by either giving them a pump in might or giving them a really strong ability. With all of those factors in mind, that leads me to believe that Jax might be, and probably is, the strongest equipment deck from Spirit Forged. He's the most flexible, has access to some of the better cards, and has the whole Ornn package of making your equipments easy to equip. As for new cards to look out for, again, just really pick your poison on any type of equipment based on the type of strategy you want to go for. And as for the two champion versions of Jax, really it's down to the personal biases. Green gives you access to more of an explosive, like, late game potential, with the fact that it just lets your weapons come out as basically like reaction spells, whereas orange Jax just gives you this nice consistent card draw effect every single turn. I'm gonna give Jax a A. So Irelia is one of the most hyped legends in the game, and it absolutely makes sense why. Now you're probably thinking, she can't be as strong as Draven, right? I mean, Draven is so good. Well, actually, she might be better. Being able to have a unit come in ready, any unit on top of that, is so good. Especially after the fact that the cost to do so is so low. And on top of that, you have the ability to do this multiple times a turn with Irelia's Conquer effect. This gives the Irelia the ability to be one of the most explosive decks coming out of the new format, especially with the idea of the fact that we want to target our units with like buff effects, most likely. So Irelia is now going to be able to go really fast, but also really hard with its units, making this one of the rare examples of Irelia just being a straight upgrade from a legend we see in the game, which is Yasuo. Yeah, Yasuo doesn't have the whole power cost of its effect, and you can immediately move a unit, but the fact that Irelia doesn't use any mana when doing so just makes probably Irelia the better version of this deck. Now, probably the strongest way to build Irelia is with spells. All of our spells will most likely be pump effects. They're cheap, efficient, and make our units big enough so when they do move in with Aurelia's effect, they can surely beat anything in combat. Like On Guard and Discipline, both these cards right now are ridiculously playable, so having the deck already have really playable cards just gives it a really solid foundation coming up to the new set. Now, we don't need to see this effect every single turn, so we want to prioritize units in this deck, especially units with ganking, as we can move them in normally, then with Aurelia's effect untap them, and then send them into the other battlefield with their ganking ability. Like Ken and Yasuo, who get a huge benefit from moving multiple times in a turn. We are missing a few key pieces, but we can look at the cards from the main set when they do come out to get the most out of Irelia. But overall, Irelia is definitely going to be one of, if not the strongest set that comes out of the format, as not only is her ability insanely good, the cards that activate it or trigger her effect are insanely great as well. We're also in two very strong colors, so we're able to fill our deck with some of the most consistent and strongest staples within those colors. As in our colors, we have some of the best interaction and card draw. Overall, a very, very strong deck with little to no downsides, in my opinion. As for new cards to look out for, we typically want to look out for more pump spells just to make our deck a bit more consistent. So Feral Strength and Switcheroo are really nice as they're both very cheap and give a pretty substantial boost effect, with Feral Strength giving up to +4 and Switcheroo being able to swap with a big unit in play. And as for our selected champion unit, we probably are going to play both in our deck, but I would say the purple Irelia is just too consistent, as the mana reduction is really huge and we can have a really bonkers turn too, as she can instantly attack on the same turn. Irelia obviously gets an S.
Nobody's master, got it? I don't want you here, and I don't want you here.
Carlo. Azir. For fuck's sake, this video is so goddamn long. Azir overall is just completely fine, in my opinion. Nothing about this legend is really stellar about it, and it's purely because of its sand ability. The fact that you need to play an equipment every time you want to create a 2 might unit is pretty limiting, because unlike Victor, who could just spam a token every single turn, Azir is just tied to a card that you have to play. So it's just a bit awkward overall. But I will say, the only interesting thing about Azir is that this is the only viable deck that allows you to play every single equipment in the game in its colors, as you reliably can create a unit that can hold the weapon every single turn. You probably could make this deck like token spammy a little bit by going wide, and yellow does have some really solid token generators, but other than that, this legend is just a bit too casual in my opinion. And that's already because the other weapon decks we've seen already just reliably have better cards in their colors. And on top of that, do not need to rely on this whole token generation thing. They can just play good units and play them onto the equipment and do that at a better efficient rate than Azir, as the others either cheat the mana cost or just give a relevant stat increase. As for new cards, just it's pretty obvious, just get every single equipment you can known to man to put in this deck. Honestly, if anyone can make this deck good, I'm going to be very, very surprised. I'm going to give Azir a C.
Oh, that's it? Hello?
Oh my god.
So Ezreal is a really interesting, nice change of pace for blue-purple, as currently the only other deck in blue-purple is Teemo, which right now is generally being pushed as a generic blue-purple deck, with a lot of spells and interaction and focusing on high strong units in the late game. Having a few cards that have the hidden keyword, but ultimately just trying to avoid that whole card type, as everything else is strictly better, and it's a real shame. However, Ezreal is able to push that as its main mechanic with its unique spell draw ability. And the fact that we're able to get that type of deck now in a more consistent way is really, really nice, as we can lean straight into one of blue-purple's greatest strengths, which is its interaction. Singularity, Rebuke, Fight or Flight, and Smokescreen are all going to be really strong spells in Ezreal, as they're all just very, very strong interaction pieces right now. One thing that I think is going to be mistaken with Ezreal is the fact that it feels like you want to draw a card every single turn. Because who wouldn't? Who wouldn't want to draw a card every single turn? Just having like 1 or 2 card draw every other turn, or maybe even 3 turns, is more than good enough. Heck, we see that in Kai'Sa, and Kai'Sa is one of the most played champions right now. Ezreal is kind of slow. We don't really have many ways to accelerate units into play like in other colors, so Ezreal can't really be attuned to the defeating aggro or aggressive styles of gameplay. But as long as Ezreal can get into the late game, we are going to be a pretty solid deck. As for new cards to look out for Ezreal, we want to up our interaction pieces quite a bit. So Wages of Pain, Switcheroo, and Factory Recall are all really solid options that disrupt opponents quite heavily. And if weapons become meta at all, Factory Recall is actually really, really good. One funny card could be Temporal Portal. Yeah, it's a bit costly to activate, but giving a spell repeat, it allows us to use 1 card to meet the 2 card requirement with Ezreal. And as for champion selector unit, I think Purple Ezreal is really, really good. Yeah, it's quite costly, but having the ability to discard 1 to draw 2 is such a nice card advantage, and the ability to reduce repeat costs is a really nice additional one. I'm gonna give Ezreal a A.
You're broken. I don't want to play with you anymore.
So Renata Glasc is an overall pretty interesting legend. We don't actually know the full extent of how good gold is going to be. But honestly, in my opinion, I think gold is going to be just really solid overall. Especially in this game style of Renata Glasc, which is going to be a late gamey deck. We have seen this game style already with Ahri at the moment, but Renata Glasc being in blue-yellow does have some redeemable qualities to it. We have access to some really strong interaction that can defeat really anything in the format at the moment, like Hidden Blade, Facebreaker, and Smokescreen. Gold will also make some of the spells with a power cost a little bit easier to cast, as we can just use our gold instead of recycling a rune. We also have strong units that can defend battlefields easy, like Lecturing Yordle, Ravenbloom Student, and Ahri. As Lecturing Yordle is a good sense of card draw, Ravenbloom Student gets pumped when we play a reactive type spells, and Ahri giving a minus might effect is really nice and stops most attackers. I will say that Renata Glasc will become the de facto Time Warp deck. Time Warp becomes so much more efficient to cast in the late game with gold. There could be a world where if you play 2 Time Warp in your deck, with the help of Renata Glasc's ability, you might be able to Time Warp 2 times in a row, which is really, really silly. Especially with right now, Time Warp acts as a way of like, oh, you reduce the requirement of when you can win. Although, the only real downside is that you have to play a quite slow game plan, and right now in the meta, slow, reactive, like wait to the late game type of decks are really bad, especially in the fact that it gives your opponent time to find answers for them to win the game. So unless there's more proactive removal or strong interaction in our colors in the future, I think this deck is just going to be a bit behind. But this deck is still playable. Like, it is definitely still playable. For new cards to look out for, we want to find cards that can give us the most out of combat interactions, as we need to save our units and our opponents go too big. So cards like Hostile Takeover, Frigid Touch, and Bonds of Strength are all really nice. Frigid Touch and Bonds of Strength are going to pump our units or reduce their units so we win in combat through normal damage. And Hostile Takeover, while quite a bit expensive, if you can get it off through Hidden, it is really strong, as it basically nullifies an attacker completely. And as for our champion unit, we most likely are going to be playing the blue Renata Glasc, as yes, the yellow one does make our gold tokens come in ready. I feel like if we're going to be leaning towards the late game, you most likely want a repeatable source of value like the blue one does, while either giving you a point or drawing you a card. I'm gonna give Renata a B. So Sivir is a weird one. I have literally not a single clue on how good this deck's gonna be. Her ability to get gold every time you recycle a rune is a pretty interesting one, as it kind of like refunds all of your plays in a sense. So we could see a really proactive deck where we're playing really high power costs and then using Sivir's ability to do that again on the next turn, as we are just using gold instead. Honestly, the most interesting thing about this card is its color combination. We've only seen MF in this color combination, and that's only really been built as a great Aurora deck. So Sivir may be a nice change of pace into seeing something new and more interesting. And we don't really have to worry about power level of our cards in our colors, because we have so many good staples right now. So let's just play anyone that you think could be good. We're honestly gonna have to wait and see if the rest of her package is gonna be worth it. As like, honestly, this deck could quickly become like an Ezreal situation, where it's just two very strong colors jammed together, and Sivir could just solidify making that work. But we're just gonna have to wait and see. As for new cards to look out for, we realistically just want to look for cards with like efficient effects and an efficient power cost, as we just want to make the most out of his gold ability. Here to Help is a really nice card, as it lets us play multiple cards in a single turn, even in combat. And Dauntless Vanguard, which actually is really good. It acts as like kind of like an accelerate if an opponent controls a battlefield. You could try the new equipment out, as again they are a cheap way to use a rune or pay a power cost. But again, unless the equipment are efficient and good in the meta, I would just keep an eye out for it. As for our champion, I think the stronger one of the two is definitely the purple one. Yes, the orange one is very cool in paper, but it's just too niche in many scenarios. Whereas the purple one is just an efficient rank with all around very solid abilities. I'm gonna give Sivir a B to an A. Again, it's blue, so most likely a B. Last but not least is Fiora, and here I thought this would end on a high note, but this card actually sucks. The main issue with Fiora is the fact that you have to make a unit become mighty. You can't just play a mighty unit to trigger an effect, which is already a little bit extra hassle. You have to wait, you have to get a unit out into play that could become mighty, then you have to play a card to make it mighty. This is quite different from cards like Lucian, who can just automatically do it on his own. Fiora needs to spend an extra card to do so, which is pretty hassle. On top of that, the thing that she actually does when you do make a unit mighty isn't very good. Ramp is famously only been good if you could do it on turns 1 or turn 2. And the fact that like with Fiora's ability, you could realistically only do this turn 2 maybe, but turn 3 onwards, making the ramp not even worth it. Now I will admit, it most likely is going to make sense as a Fiora weapon deck, as Fiora basically just refunds the equip cost of weapons. But even then, like the other equipment decks are just so much stronger. Jax does what she does, but way better and more efficient. And Ornn does that as well, but also helps cast the equipment. Like it just, Fiora is just sadly a nothing burger. As for new cards to look out for, Lauren Duelist is pretty good actually. It has the ability to trigger Fiora on its own. Riding the Troops is able to make our units come in with an additional buff to make them a bit bigger, and also draws a card, which generally is pretty nice. Riposte, actually a really good card. It's a shame that it's in Fiora's colors, but it is actually a very solid card, countering a spell and buffing our units. And for our champion unit, I will choose Yellow Fiora here, as Yellow Fiora just gives us the ability to be explosive at the end of our game. Fiora gets a D. Not a good card. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if I got any of these decks wrong. I probably didn't, but I'll be happy to be proven otherwise. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this really early set. Oh fuck!